The bagpipes mean only one thing. It's time for DERFCAST, episode number 53. And let's go right in, bring our guest in. This week's guest is noted author, wrestling historian. He has 2 books out. The first one is When It Was Big Time, a 100-year history of Northern California professional wrestling, which is in its 3rd printing. And his second book, Bad to the Bone, 25 years of riots in wrestling by Rotten Ron Starr, with my guest this week, Rock Rims. Welcome, Rock.
Hey, Fred, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. And after the interview, I'll announce to everybody out there how they can hear this show and on SoundCloud.com and iTunes. So, I want to thank you for coming on. It's been a while since you and I have talked. And I remember once we had a almost 3-hour conversation on the phone about LaBelle Wrestling in Southern California. And welcome.
Thank you, Fred. Glad to hear.
So, tell me, what was your reasoning to start publishing the Northern California book? What made you decide?
Well, for those men I know, I actually grew up in Southern California as a fan of the Southern California wrestling promotion out in Los Angeles, Mike Bell. And I actually probably maybe about, let's say probably about 9 years ago, I got some DVDs of the LaBelle promotion from the 70s. And on those DVDs were also a couple of shows from Roy Scheider's Big Time Wrestling, taped at that time in Sacramento, and covering the Northern California region. It was interesting because I saw these wrestlers, many of whom I had seen out here in Southern California, but they were wrestling in Northern California, but this product was different. So it piqued my interest. As a kid growing up and you read the wrestling magazines, you read about all these other territories, but you never actually see the product itself. And so you're always kind of curious about, what it would be like to watch that product. I think if I had a time machine, I would love to be able to go back in time, maybe in the 70s. And if I had I was independently wealthy at the same time, I would love to go travel around the country, travel around the continent, in fact, and actually just see arena shows, house shows of every territory. I think that it's like an amazing fantasy come true for me, So that piqued my interest, and then we had the California Classic Wrestling Facebook page that I joined about 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and that gave me more exposure to fans like yourself who grew up with the Northern California wrestling product, and I just found it very intriguing the more I learned about Roy Scheider and the way he booked his storylines. The man was obviously a genius, and it was very intriguing to learn about that. And so that's what actually got my interest in the territory itself. Subsequent interviews with the late Roy Alexander, who was a big fan of Roy Scheider's product, and a series of articles, and just got me thinking, we could actually do a whole book on the whole territory, and not just the Roy Scheider era, but going back 100 years. I figured if there was plenty of people who were looking to do a book on the Southern California territory, which I had in mind at the time, but you know what? No one was really talking about doing it for Northern California. I just thought it was such an incredible territory, and it deserved more recognition than it ever got, and it couldn't be lost to history, the memory of it. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. Hopefully the Southern California book project be still there when I come back, when I'm done. If not, if I don't do this, nobody else probably will.
Well, I'm sure glad you have done it. I've read a couple excerpts from it, and it's funny you should mention the same reasoning, that thinking process that started you on your project. I thought about it a long time ago that, geez, I hope somebody does do some research and put some love into this, because it's a subject that is so near and dear to people that paid attention to it, because it just went away all of a sudden. The Shire's promotion just folded, and we had a number of other promotions come in, and there really wasn't that much video of the Shire's promotion. So your book is just such a godsend to people. I've spoken to at least 4 or 5 friends and one old friend that I came in contact with, and 3 of them have already bought the book from you. Two of them are going to. And it just relives so many big memories for us. Let me ask you this question. What were some of the wrestlers that you interviewed for this book?
Let's see. Well, there was Ron Starr, who did who I also did my biography with, who was recently released. Former U.S. heavyweight champion there from Roy Shire, and also a Typhoon champion. Alexis Smirnoff, who had the same titles there in Northern California from Roy Shire. Irish Mickey Doyle. Christopher Marquez, who was partner from L.A. In order to work for Roy Shire, but he actually had some very interesting stories in there regarding Roy and Buddy Rose, who had a very contentious relationship to the Middle East. And then, let's see, who else was there that I interviewed? Dickie Steinborn from back in the 60s, you know. And that's one of the things that was the impetus for writing this book as well, too, is that though I did have access and got some great insights from some people who worked for Roy Shire and knew him well, there's a lot of them, there's basically like the way Ron puts it, people who dropped in like flies. You know, a lot of these people who are part of the sports important path in history, you know, they're gone. So that was another incentive for me to get this done and get this and do a good job of it, but also to get it out while we're all still alive to enjoy it.
Definitely great reasons and great names that you mentioned. I mean, you know, a lot of people that were not like marks, I don't want to say marks, but a lot of casual friends that just attended the Cow Palace matches have no idea of the background stories of some of the angles and feuds that Roy had. I mean, I could name the Great Mephisto, Buddy Rose, that he had problems with, that all of a sudden the wrestlers just left. And it's always been a mystery of the Buddy Rose and the Great Fuji masquerade that Toru Tanaka came in under a mask. Those are two things in your book that definitely any fan of Roy Shire's era has to know the truth finally. How did you find out the truth of those two, of the Fuji and Buddy Rose stories?
Well, it took a lot of research, obviously. I did, first of all, was just to find out what were people's perception of what went on. So I went back to some of the older pro wrestling boards and looking at, researching the discussions that people had and what their recollections were. And then trying to find the truth within those, because, memories can make liars of us all.
Yeah, of course.
So looking at that, looking at the news coverage, and then, of course, yes, taking into account what people, what they remembered and recollected about it. There's some things in the book, I think those are very accurate, representations of what happened are in the book. But there are some things which I don't go and say this is a definite thing, this is what happened, and this is the absolute, truth of what occurred. Some things I write them in such a way so to let people decide for themselves what they want to believe. Well, in the end, that's what they're going to do anyways,
Right.
But, truth really is stranger than fiction. So what I did, one of the goals was for me to not only provide an accurate as possible accounting of what happened in certain situations, but also to dispel some of the myths, pro wrestling itself is a larger-than-life sport, and, Ray Stevens had a saying, I guess that team, I think it probably was, who chided him, Ray, you don't have to exaggerate in your stories, and, Ray would laugh and say, well, if it's worth telling, it's worth embellishing, and that's kind of the mindset that some pro wrestlers had. And it's a world of rumors back in the territory days. A lot of times things were spread as truth and weren't necessarily 100% accurate, maybe far from accurate. Wrestling fans are prone to the same thing too, and again, larger than life sport. It's very easy to exaggerate, and then not only that, but also something's put on the internet, it's perceived to be as true. It must be true if it's on the internet. A lot of people don't take the time to fact check, And then when you're looking back at memories of things that occurred 30, 40 years ago, it's very easy to maybe get some things wrong. So, yeah, a lot of research, not looking at it. It's kind of, the book is written kind of somewhat like a documentary, in that you get different perspectives on something, on different things, on the same item. This way you can hopefully come to the truth or have an accurate representation of what actually occurred. So, yeah, Buddy Rose, for instance. We talk about the Buddy Rose, the infamous shoot on Roy Shire. A lot of people, what I found, I know people like Dave Meltzer made this in same observation, is that even people who were there, they all come away. It was like, were you at the same event? Because they all came out with different stories of what happened. So yeah, it takes a lot of work, but also I had access to documents from the Royshire archives that a lot of people didn't have. So that also helped as well too, to keep things accurate. Buddy himself actually didn't. He told the story, different versions of the story.
Yes. I've heard the shoot interview.
Yeah. So it's a lot, and it's funny. And oddly enough, some people he told the story to, he did tell it accurately, but in other interviews they weren't so accurate. So it's very easy if you're a professional wrestler, even if you're there, to you have so many matches, you work so many territories, and often you work the same territories more than once. It's very easy to have the different events be together. So you get the timeline mixed up. You think that one thing that happened at this time when it really actually happened later on, or it happened in a different territory, or it happened with a different individual. So, yeah, it took a lot of sorting out, and it was exciting. It was like a treasure hunt.
Oh, I mean, I bet. The angle that we're referring to, or Rock and I are referring to, is Buddy came out of the dressing room, delivered a shoot speech about Roy, and you'll just have to get the book to read the truth about it. And the other angle that I just cannot wait, as a matter of fact, I might even just start on that chapter, is the Great Fuji, Toru Tanaka, Pat Patterson, Roman Gladiator death match angle, which I was there at the Cow Palace, and I knew right away it wasn't Fuji under a mask because he was twice, Toru Tanaka was a very physically big person. And Fuji was a normal-sized guy like Pat Patterson. They were probably about the same size. So, yeah, the book will tell about that famous angle. And did you get information on that angle from the archives of Roy or from other wrestlers?
That one was largely had to do with fans and current newspaper accounts. There was actually a lot of coverage.
Yes.
More coverage than Roy's promotion had gotten in years. It's just amazing what controversy would do as far as garnering attention from the press. There weren't as many snide remarks, from the sports writers. Everybody was intrigued about what happened.
Right.
The one thing I got to say about Roy Shire, Roy Shire was he was the kind of guy you could probably pass any lie detector test without any problem, regardless if he was lying or not, cool as cucumber, that guy, and but they really, and the book will go into some of the different things that he had a lot of conflicts with the State Athletic Commission. Oh, he had a lot of conflicts with everybody, just given his temperament.
Right.
But, he had a lot of conflicts with the State Athletic Commission, of course, which, his temperament, having conflicts with other individuals isn't necessarily going to threaten his business. His conflicts with the Athletic Commission definitely could. So it talks about different things in there, and, he got away with so much for so long. I'm sure that had to upset his confidence and his tremendous ego that he had already. So.
Well, yeah, there's the famous story. He lost the TV channel because of spitting tobacco juice. And it's interesting, the main wrestlers that he never had a big problem with because they were always back for him, Patterson, Ray, of course, and Lonnie Mayne always came back. But there were the other wrestlers he had problems with. And, people out there, you'll just have to get the book to read about that. But you also talk about Mike LaBelle's promotion for a bit in the book.
Yeah, I do. Because of their close proximity together, the promotions really have a strong history. Let's be a little more accurate about that. Not the promotions, but the territory themselves.
Yes,
this goes way back before, the Ballard or Shire. Back in the 30s, you had, Vince McMahon was not the first one to, attempt national expansion. He started the first one to actually be successful at it. So it goes back into that, and you really have that history. History repeats itself. So you had, back in the 30s, you had a lot of talent sharing, and you had promoters who got together and basically shared the talent and tried to dominate the industry. And so there was a lot of talent exchange between Southern California, which makes sense. I mean, they're close proximity, short drives, and it helps keep things fresh for the local wrestling fans to see new faces coming in. These things from going stale. But also, too, it also gives the impression that, hey, we're not just a local promotion. We bring in the best talent from around the country.
Right. I mean, another part in the book that you cover fairly well is when Roddy Piper and Lonnie Main were feuding with each other here in San Francisco for a short feud, but then tag teaming at the same time down in LaBelle's promotion, and how that broke kayfabe. And you covered that perfect. That one chapter you sent me, everybody has to read that. It's just such an eye-opening period. And you go into Lonnie Main very well, a lot of information about him. And I appreciate the fact that you were in contact with his brother, Sean, for a lot of that information. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say that, I did have the, actually for several years now, Sean and I have been in contact about different things regarding Lonnie. I wanted to make sure that it was accurate. And I also wanted to have respect for the family, for the memory of Lonnie. And again, actually, the book will cover different things regarding, Lonnie's early demise. There were a lot of rumors that went out regarding his death and some of the circumstances surrounding it. Again, people will come away after reading it, and they'll still hold on to whatever opinions they might have. But I think a lot of people, it'll be eye-opening for some people when they see some of the facts. Again, sometimes people like to sensationalize things, and they'd rather believe the drama than to believe what actually occurred.
Right. Yeah.
So it was important for me to, to be accurate as possible. But it was also good too to be able to show a different side of Lonnie Main, behind the professional wrestler that intrigued us, whether we loved him or we hated him. A very, 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 very likable guy. He's one of those guys. I say, there's three people. I personally would prefer to work on autobiographies because you get the subject involved and you get the perspective, rather than a biography where basically everything has to go secondhand. And then that subject, a lot of times people, when they write a biography, they'll go ahead and they'll put that on paper as their interpretation of the information they collected.
Right, which is not right.
I prefer an autobiography. But if I was going to do a biography, there's very few that I'd be willing to do. One of them would be Lonnie Main, the other one would be Roy Shire, and the other one would be Ray Stevens. Ironically, they just happen to have been individuals who are prominent in Northern California, but yeah, very, very fascinating individuals. I think probably only one of the three may possibly be possible to do it right. So we'll have to see how that goes.
Well, you'll have time. I mean, your current two books are very successful, and your blogs are amazing, which you've been writing, I think, 3-4 years. And you've touched base on Chavo Guerrero, on Pat Patterson, on Ray Stevens, on Lonnie Main, on all sorts of subjects. And I'm so glad you put the book together. The other thing I wanted to mention to you, I've never told you, when I went down to Roddy's memorial at the Comedy Store, I did ask Gene LaBelle about Lonnie Main. And the one thing he said, he was quiet off stage, off camera, but put him in front of a camera, and it was just like night and day. And Judo Gene really liked him. He said it was just a tragedy that he left us so soon. And the one thing that Gene said was, can you imagine Main as a manager? And I said, you mean like the modern-day Lou Albano? And he goes, exactly. I think Lonnie would have just been a fantastic manager.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things they'll do, too. The book will go into examining... a lot of people don't realize that Lonnie really didn't have plans to get into this a lot longer. The book will talk about that. But the biggest impact, of course, obviously the huge impact is loss of his life was a loss of a big loss for professional wrestling, but even a larger loss for his family.
Right. Well, he was family in Oregon, and long story short, he was loved in the Portland area, just more so up there than here, and just worshipped. And his tagline was "Excitement in the air." And when he was there was. And to think that everything he accomplished, I mean, as you know, he went to the East Coast, fought Morales, fought San Martino, went to Texas, fought the Sheik a couple of times, which you brought to my attention. I never even knew that. All this that he accomplished, the titles in Southern California, Northern California during the same time, both heavyweight championships, all under the age of, 34, if I'm not mistaken?
I believe he was just shy of 33. I think he was about to turn 33.
I mean, what an amazing career in a short span of time. You know, and he spawned how many copycat wrestlers? You know, the Moondogs in Lawler's territory. There was another Moondog in Stu Hart's territory real quick. That didn't last long at all. Someone told me about that. But, yeah, I mean, just an amazing performer. I hope in the future you can do a biography about him. I think he's one of the most underrated and underappreciated wrestlers ever. He's like the Kenny Singleton of professional wrestling.
Good way of putting it. Yeah, I think it's probably not likely for that to happen, only because the main family is a very private family. And, you know, Lonnie's, excitement in the air, but the other catch phrase for him was, every day is like Christmas. And being as exuberant as he was and having that mentality, every day was like Christmas, he probably got into some kind of things that probably, not terrible or bad, but just, just kind of goes with the territory of having that mentality.
Well,
and,
yeah.
you don't want to respect his privacy. And
exactly. I get what you're saying. The story of him in Hawaii, and he was a star in Hawaii too, and but yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I'm so looking forward to the book. Now, where can people order that book at? The first book we're talking about.
When it was Big Time, and 1 year history of Northern California professional wrestling, they can go to there's a site set up for it. When it was Big Time.blogspot.com.
Gotcha.
And there will be a summary of all the chapters, giving you an idea of the 28 chapters, contents of each, and there will be images for the book, and there will be information on how they can order it.
I have to admit, you've taken this to a very professional level. I've looked at the website. Everything you want to know about the book before buying it is there. You took your time in crafting this book, writing it, doing the research. I'm so glad it's in the third printing. Let's change subject. Go to your second book, Bad to the Bone, 25 Years of Riots in Wrestling by Rotten Ron Starr, and with yourself, of course, Rock Rims. Tell us how you came about that book. It's a very interesting story.
Yeah, it's a autobiography, and it's obviously a very different book than the first one. Not quite as thick, of course, Ron hasn't had 100 years yet, so we don't have that much history to cover. The Northern California book covered 100 years, and by the way, just so people are aware, it is in a deluxe format. Most books tend to be about 6x9, maybe you might get a 7x9. This is an 8x10 deluxe format, and that was actually one of the things I had to really, really think about regarding the Northern California book, was what size do we want to have it, And so finally we settled on the 8x10. I felt it was deserving of that type of format. It does distinguish itself from some of the other books out there, but there's 350 pages,
Great.
Over 200 photos. So there's a lot of text, but there's also a lot of photos. Some of them never before published.
Well, that's why I said.
From Modesto, Jim Fitzpatrick from the Cow Palace, Bobby Ortega, who also shot for the Cow Palace in the late 70s, and at the Sacramento TV studio show, CTXL. Victor Berry, of course, who produced programs in the early 70s in Sacramento, Stockton, and San Francisco. And Robert Counts, Rodney DeShino, some photographers whose names may not matter how much you think you know about the territory, no matter how much you figure, well, I've seen all the photos, you haven't. Not seen all the photos that are contained in this book. You do not know all the information that is in this book, And it's not like, okay, well, Rock Rims do it all. Put it on there. No. I had the help of a lot of different people, interviewed lots of people, including yourself, some of the fans, some of the people who worked at the promotion, some of the professional wrestlers, along with the research. So it really, in a way, kind of was a group project, which is why, again, no one person is going to know what everybody can know as a group collectively. So.
Well, that's so true. You've also interviewed, I told you a couple good stories. A man who's been on my podcast before, Alan Bolte. Very
sweet, one of the announcers.
Sweet guy.
Ken Ramey. I like Ken Ramey. Ken Emery. I wish I had interviewed Ken Ramey. The good doctor, unfortunately, passed away before I contacted him. Ken Emery was an announcer for several years before Alan Bolte.
Right.
A lot of people who are maybe only familiar with Alan will be very interested to learn about Ken. Also, he has a very, very interesting story in there. During one of the discussing one of the hazards that you sometimes have to deal with when you're
right.
Wrestling.
Yeah, definitely with the wrestling bear. Alan is such a sweet, sweet man. I get to hang out with him once or every 6 weeks. There's a promotion here in the Bay Area, Kurt White's Big Time Wrestling. And Alan's the house announcer, so I tag with him and go to those shows, independent, of course. Such a sweet man. So many stories, which just so many. I mean, you'll mention a name like the Great Mephisto, and all of a sudden he's off and running about something that he saw in the dressing room, and I'm really glad that he's a part of your book. Great guy.
Yes, we had to make sure that we had it's not only a story about the wrestlers themselves, but a story about the promotion of people. You go to the movie theater, and you see a movie, and when the movie's over, and when you walked in, you had certain names that were up on the marquee, but when you have those credits rolling at the end, if you take time to sit there for a minute or two, you get to see all the people that are involved with the final product of production.
Right.
The same thing with professional wrestling. You have a lot more performers in the ring who are involved in making their success. So we acknowledge them, and we tell their story, but of course they also have some insights behind the scenes that a lot of us will not have access to. And even Roy Shire's son, there's comments from him as well in the book.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there are actually comments from Roy from his personal journals.
Regarding his
startup and the promotion. So if you haven't seen it, if you've just read the articles in the newspaper about what was going on, and you read people writing their pieces on the history of the territory, then you still have not seen, or heard or read it in Roy's own words, what it was like when he was starting up the territory, what was involved with that. So it was very, very interesting. Now, to go back to the book and get off, you asked a question about Ron Starr's book, how we got started with that. Again, California Classic Wrestling. He went on there. Cowboy Johnny Mantel, who was a friend of his, he's the current head of the president of the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Right. He's been on my show.
Yeah, out in Wichita Falls, Texas.
Right.
They do a fantastic job over there, very passionate, and I actually live a few blocks from where Johnny grew up as a kid, he was someone that he wrestled as the Hood in Los Angeles, was Ron's tag team partner here in Los Angeles back in 1980. That's when I first saw Ron Starr as a wrestler. And it's funny how this all came about. Ron ends up going, I guess it was about over 3 years ago. He goes on Johnny's podcast that he had at the time, and they're talking. I go, wow, Ron Starr, there's a name I haven't heard for a while, And I think I had already met Johnny and had dinner with Johnny, and we had been talking for a while. Actually, no, we hadn't met yet. We talked a little bit. I got him some footage because he was looking for footage from his time as the Hood in Los Angeles, and I had several matches of his. I put some DVDs for him. Ron found out about it, and what happened was Ron had a house fire back in, I believe, in the 90s, the early 90s, and he was living in Florida. Lightning struck the apartment house building, and his robes, wrestling for 25 years all over the world, his robes, his the videotapes he had of his matches, the magazines, photos, they were all gone from fire. So he was looking for some footage of his matches, and I had some. So connected, or I made some DVD trims. I acquired more footage from his matches in other territories he worked, got that, and then we just started talking, and I decided, this is a guy that more people didn't know about. I appreciated his work as a heel in California. He was one of those heels that was very, very unique in that he could actually wrestle. That's not to say that a lot of heels back in the day they couldn't wrestle. There was some good, but there was the emphasis really was on brawling. There was even some promoters that told wrestlers, "Why are you trying to wrestle?" They told the heels, "Why are you trying to wrestle in the ring? You're supposed to be a heel. You're supposed to be a bad guy. You're supposed to brawl. Leave the scientific wrestling to the babyface." But Ron was able to pull it off, and he was the kind of wrestler that pissed you off because he could beat the babyface hero you were cheering for by actually wrestling, and not by having to resort to cheating. And I think that pissed you off even more because he had to admit that he was that good. So we got talking, and then eventually we did a couple pieces of articles, and he was giving me information for the Northern California book. And then at one point he said, would you like to help me with my book? I'd like to do a book. I've always wanted to do it. Would you be willing to do that? And I said, yeah. And they go, it'll be about a year before we can get started, Ron. This was 3 years ago. Because I'm working on this Northern California book, and I have a date in mind I want to finish by. And but if you can wait, we'll talk about it then. And a year later on, we had that conversation. We got going. That was about a little over 2 years ago.
And it's out. It's out now. It's available at whenitwasbigtime.blog. Excuse me, whenitwasbigtimeblogspot.com. And
the Northern California book. Ron's book has a different site.
Oh, sorry.
One is Rotten Ron Star. Blogspot.com.
Gotcha. Well, Ron Starr, another underrated wrestler. I saw him at the Cow Palace. I saw that Battle Royal, and I couldn't believe how loud the cheering was when he won that night. It was amazing, and you can see that on YouTube. I always felt a little bad because he just didn't really get over like I thought he would. I mean, he had all the moves. He did flying wrestling, lucha style. He did everything. You could tell the guy was a seasoned pro when he came here. And he just didn't catch, the whole territory was kind of going down by then.
Actually, he did catch on because he had the tag titles from him right away from the get-go when he came into the territory.
I stand corrected.
It wasn't only probably maybe about 2-3 months down the road, he won the Battle Royal, wrestled Hardy Race, the Wolf chimed in to a draw the very same night. And you look at that Battle Royal, to me, that was the last huge joint Battle Royal for Worcestershire territory. Over 14,000 fans. I think the next two Battle Royals to the last two, 80 and 81, I think combined they drew about that much.
Yeah, during that time, the reason why I probably said it wrong, have a bad memory, is I went into boot camp right after that Battle Royal that Ron Starr won. So,
and it wasn't that long actually after when you had the demise of the territory. That was actually the last big drawing card. That's the last big drawing Battle Royal, but the last big drawing card in Northshire's territory. And it was only a couple of years away before, 2 years from its demise. So it's just a matter of timing,
Right.
He got over well, he got used well, but just, there was a whole lot of different things, and it's covered in both books, but more in detail in the Northern California wrestling territory, but about what was going on in Worcestershire's territory and in the general wrestling, wrestling landscape. And that led to the demise of Worcestershire's territory. But yeah, that's one of the good things about Ron is that he went to so many different places, and it really gives you a look at what it was like during the territory days. It's not, Ron was never in a place like, say, for instance, like Ray Stevens,
right.
Later on, for the final battle royal. It's it's about a guy who journeyed from place to place, and we saw the struggles of even if you're a good performer, what it was like, to work in the territory days. But what's great is that you travel with him on all these on this journey, and you get to know about him as an individual before you know him as a pro wrestler. And it's just really a fascinating story, and you hear about all these different, wrestlers that he worked with, and you hear these different road stories with overseas, in Japan, China, Africa, So a lot of people got to see Ron Sarn. You're right, and not that we use the word underrated, but I don't think he's ever been underrated by anybody who's ever watched him. I think he's underrated in the overall discussion about the greatest of professional wrestling because he just never really got that national run.
That's what I meant to say,
Well, and I think that's what most people mean to say, but he just never had that national run. Better timing, was a big part of it, He came along before the days of the WWF and the national expansion, but he had that hard-nosed work ethic in the ring, His matches with Ronnie Garvin, if anyone's ever seen him on YouTube, there's one of them uploaded on there, are just incredible. He just agree. I think anybody who's watched him, from the fans to those his co-workers, a lot of respect for his work in the ring.
Definitely. Well, do you go into part of the title is riots? Where were some of the riots he was in? I'm willing to bet they were in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, well, the majority of them probably were in Puerto Rico. He's had riots and near riots here stateside as well, too. A lot of there's altercations with fans. There's backstage altercations with some of his coworkers. Ron wasn't one to take anything off of anybody, and very professional about his job, but he had his limits. And like he says, he's ready to scrap in the New York second, if need be. But yeah, there was most of the riots were in Puerto Rico. All the chapters are fun, but those two in particular, I think, are probably the most exciting when you talk about drama. Like he said, the fans were crazy over there, and it's not to be derogatory towards the fans in Puerto Rico. Just basically, they were just so passionate.
Right.
And he used the word like marks in the sense of people who are outside of the business and they believe in what they're seeing is real. Of course, the fans of Puerto Rico, they were the epitome of marks.
I bet from other things I've read. Now, was he in Puerto Rico during the Bruiser Brody tragedy?
He was, in fact, there. The book will talk about his early meeting of Brody. They met actually way back when Ron was a couple years in the business, but Brody was a rookie. So he talks about his friendship with Brody, and also the friendship between Stan Hansen and Bruiser Brody. And he was there that night. In fact, he ended up. The card was slated for Ron to be in a tag team match. He was not only there that night when Brody was killed and during the aftermath, but he was also working the ring with Jose Gonzalez.
Oh.
The individual who stabbed Brody in the locker room.
Right.
So, the book will go into that. We'll discuss, Ron's recollection of what happened, and also discuss the aftermath. And it has some pretty interesting things in there that you never heard anywhere else.
Gotcha.
But very, very sad night. And as Ron says, even to this day, he still talks to, or he still thinks about Brody all the time. And in fact, it was a couple of years ago, I put him and Barbara Goodish, Frank's widow, put them together, so that they could talk on the phone about those days. And so this is right around an anniversary, marking the passing of Bruiser Brody.
I guess the hardcore wrestling fans out there, Derek Sousa, Joe Sousa, yourself, and myself, know the tie-in between the Brody murder and Roy Shire's wrestling, Manuel Cruz.
Yeah.
turned into Jose
that was
Gonzalez.
The name that Gonzalez was using down here. So yeah, they're familiar with it. You know, and it never ceases. Whenever the name comes up, our Manuel Cruz, who was working in the early 70s in the Rosario promotion, and never ceases to get a avocado from somebody, you know.
Yeah.
Just very upset about, you know, what went down, you know. So.
Well, it's funny because back when I first interviewed you in my rookie podcast days at another place, you told me that, and I was stunned. I did not know that. You know, that's who he was. Alan Bolte tells a story that when Brody did come for a Shires, I'm mixed up if he came for a Battle Royal.
He did.
Okay, so there's a picture of Brody and Alan in a program. I have to dig it up.
Alan sent me a copy of that program. Is it the one where Brody's choking Alan?
Yeah, that is such a great picture. And then Alan told me in the car when we're driving one of our wrestling matches that he was as light as a feather, and Brody told him to make faces beforehand. You know, and Alan goes, "I know how to be kayfabe." You know. But it's just a shame that Shires didn't use Brody more, or whatever the reasonings was. I'm just sad that Brody never came here. Other than that, Abdullah the Butcher, names like that. But I'm jumping to the wrong book. But back to Ron. I can hardly wait to read the chapters that you're talking about, the riots. And that match that he had against Harley Race was amazing. I saw Race wrestle Dean Ho. Nothing to take away from Dean. It was 3 times the better match, Ron and Race.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just 3 times the better match. And again, not to take anything away from Dean, but just Ron knew what he was doing, and you could just tell it was a back-and-forth match, and they both enjoyed it, from what I saw. And I was like 16, going on 17 or so. You know, I was a little bit more educated into wrestling by then, and I could just tell that they enjoyed that match, wrestling each other.
Yeah, well, Ron was, you know, again, it's not taking anything away from Dean Ho. You know, there's a lot of different things that can go into making someone successful as a professional wrestler, you know, particularly during that time. Dino was extremely popular. You know, he was capable in the ring, but he definitely was not a technician or didn't have the wrestling background that Ron had.
Right.
You know? So, you know, again, doesn't take anything away from Dino to just basically say that Ron was definitely a much better worker. I mean, there are some actually great legends in the business. If I were to mention their names, I'll probably get a lot of backlash from people, but I'll be the first to say they weren't very good workers, you know. But what is a good worker? You know, I guess that comes down to the definition of what is a good worker. You know, I remember Ric Flair caught some joke that Hogan told him the best worker, and this is when Ric Flair first went to the WWF. I think it was 1990. You know, Hogan made the joke in the dressing room. He goes, "The best worker is the one who draws the most." And Rick just laughed, you know, because he understood what he said. Because the bottom line is to draw money. And so, you know, again, you have some of the greats in the ring weren't necessarily good workers. And then there's others who had great gimmicks, like George, for instance, yet they don't get acknowledged for how good a worker they were. I mean,
right.
Just forget about the gimmick. You just watch them work in the ring, watch a couple of his matches that are more than 5 or 10 minutes long. They'd be amazed at how much he understood how to work in the ring psychology. Forget about getting the fans upset about, you know, because of his antics or his gimmick, but just the way he worked in the ring was amazing. Ron was an excellent worker, and he talks about that night. He talks about how that match came about because he wasn't originally scheduled to wrestle Hardy that night, and he talks about his. And that's the one thing. When you read his account of what happened, you still see the fan in Ron Starr. And to this very day, Ron Starr is still a fan of professional wrestling, and that's where it started. This is a story about somebody who had that dream. From the time, you know, he says, and you look, as you read the first chapter, you understand what I'm talking about when he says that, you know, hey, I was born to become a professional be a professional wrestler. And he got to live that dream. You know, it wasn't always easy doing so, but he got to do what a lot of people don't get to do, and that's essentially, you know, set a goal, a lifelong goal that he pursued and he achieved, and he got to ply his trade all around the world, 25 years.
That is a storied career that he's had. I mean, he went to so many territories. The one wrestler, you know, that I've watched over the years that reminded me of him was Ted DiBiase. They both never achieved the world title, but just were solid workers and could be heels or good guys. But I would have loved to seen a match between those two.
They actually worked together early in their careers. They are often traveling companions, and they were working for Mid-South territory.
McGurk.
Bill Watts was booking one end, and pretty much Grizzly Smith, the father of Jake the Snake Roberts, was booking the other end. So they were offering traveling companions, even though they really weren't supposed to, because Ted was a baby face, and Ron at that particular time was working heel. But they were pretty good friends, you know, at that time. And you know, and yes, again, guys who are workhorses in the ring, that have a good match with just about anybody, typically sound, you know. And again, I think that makes a more interesting heel when you have someone who's picked.
Well, I mean, you know, from what I saw, it's like if he would have come to San Francisco with bleach blonde hair, he would have fit in with Patterson and Ray perfectly. You know, he knew what he was doing. That I could tell right away. You know, I said to my friend Kevin Strong, I go, geez, this guy's really good. You know, but like I had said earlier, the territory was kind of coming to an end, and, you know, I went to boot camp right away, so I missed his whole tenure here outside of the Battle Royal, which is a shame, because when I came back out of boot camp, guys like Bulldog Bob Brown was at the Cow Palace. We could talk about that at another time. I missed Ron here, so I'm really looking forward to reading that book. I have seen a lot of his matches from L.A., tapes of them, you know, that are on YouTube.
Mickey, a lot of matches, too, of the other territories that I put up there. And that's one thing, too. Unfortunately, you do miss out. I mean, watching a tape of a match, seen on YouTube or DVD, it's not the same as, you know, being in the arena during that particular time. You know, being there, following the storylines, and knowing what's at stake, having that emotional investment. It's not the same, but he's one of those workers where you can watch, never having, you know, seen the storylines, don't know anything about it, but you can watch his matches, and you can just say, wow, that's some great stuff there. I mean, I had a guy who's, I think in his early, 25 years old. He's 25 years old, so he pretty much just grew up with WWF from the late 90s on up as a fan. I showed him that match between him and Ronnie Garvey. And mind you, this is just a teaming match. This is only an 8-minute match. But it just blew his mind. He's like, wow, look at those guys. It's like UFC, you know, and these guys are going at it. It's a hard-fought match. You know, anyone listening, you got 8 minutes of your time, go on YouTube, check out Ron Starr versus Ronnie Garvey, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And he was just marking out for it so much. He just is unbelievable. Oh, look what he's doing to him. Oh, look what he's doing to his leg. Oh, man, how can he say that? You know, he knows it's a word, but he forgot about it. You know, he was able to suspend his disbelief. And, again, never had seen either worker before. And you can only imagine what their 45-minute, what their hour matches were like when they were working in Georgia back in 1985.
Oh, I imagine. I mean, well,
nobody has ever seen it. Never not said that they were just outstanding, some of the best matches they've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, well, he wrestled for an hour draw here after the Battle Royal?
Yep.
I remember right. It wasn't 45. It was an hour. Definitely underrated performer. I've had Mickey Doyle on, and he can't stop talking about him, which is great. I mean, Mickey really, really liked him.
Yeah. Mickey has some good memories of him. You know, they worked in LA. A
you're kind of breaking up there, Rock.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, they worked in L.A. Mickey said some things. A lot of respect for Ron. Ron is excellent. It's just a matter of how he was in the ring. It wasn't a matter of him, being willing to fight a drop of hat and maybe to protect the business. Because you have to remember, this was a time when fans rushed the rings, and of course, anyone involved with riots, you're obviously gonna be involved with some kind of physical confrontation at one point or another. Ron has also had a lot of physical challenges since he left the business. He's had about 3 or 4 strokes, a few heart attacks. Just in the last 2 years, I can't tell you how many times he's been in the ICU. I mean, he just came out of ICU over a week ago. It seems like every 3 months, on the average, he ends up in the hospital. One challenge after another, but like because I don't know the cocktail, can't get rid of me. And it's true, and it's amazing. This is really, really a tough guy. And Mickey phoned him, and they had a very long conversation during Ron's stint in the hospital. And that's really a good thing too, is that you have these relationships, and it talks about that. The book talks about relationships that are formed, and you run into guys in the business later on down the road. That's
right.
The territories where you stay in a certain area for a few months, maybe a year at the most, if you're really over, and you move on to someplace else. You often go back to the same places again, and that's what the book talks about too.
Right.
Some of these relationships that started out early in their careers, and then they run into each other later on. And in the case of Mickey and Ron, I mean, they're still, friends. They don't talk often, but and still good friends. Even Johnny Mantel, still good friends. Roddy Piper, Roddy, they're a huge fan of Roddy Piper. They were roommates at one point, when they were working in Portland. So it talks about that, and Ron talks about his relationships. He talks about the loss of some of these individuals that he worked with, and then
really,
pro wrestlers don't tend to have a very long lifespan. So he talks about like Adrian Adonis. He talks about Roddy Piper and the loss of these friends. Adonis, he has some hilarious stories. I'm actually going to share one with you that we didn't put in the book. So Ron going to tell me afterward, or say, Ron, let's save that for a podcast or something. So there's a few stories that we actually say I have written down somewhere that we use when Ron's feeling better and we can go on the podcast. But Adrian Adonis was a tag team partner in Portland, and he was just one of the biggest ribbers that Ron ever knew. Eddie Rose was their big target. He was the victim. There's several ribs on Buddy in there. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you perfect.
Okay. But there was one time Ron and Adrian Adonis went fishing with our duck hunting with Dutch Mantel. Dutch had a little boat, and he was a star in the Pacific Northwest, and he promoted a couple of towns. Was a booker to some degree for a while. And so Dutch had taken Ron out, duck hunting at one point. The story about that is in the book. But on another occasion, Adrian also went along with them. Now, when Ron first told me this story, I thought it went like this. They get in the boat, and Dutch is doing something, and all of a sudden you hear a big blast. And Dutch turns around, and Adonis had thrown a hole in the bottom of Dutch's boat. And Dutch is freaking out. I mean, there's water coming in the boat, and I'm laughing when I'm hearing this story, right? Because I'm thinking, oh, man, here's Adonis, probably never had a gun in his life, and he goes onto the boat and just it's the kind of thing that would happen to Adrian Adonis. Such a character that he attracted that kind of thing. But I didn't find out until Ron talked to me about the story again a couple weeks ago that Adrian actually did it intentionally. Adrian went in there, and he pretended like it was an accident, but he looked at Ron, and Dutch was, attention was diverted elsewhere, and he kind of gives him the high sign, like, watch this, and then he takes the shotgun, and he blows the hole on the bottom of Dutch's boat intentionally, and of course, that was into the boat, because, all the water started coming in and so forth, and of course, Adrian tried to play it up, like it was an accident. So. Wasn't anything that he wouldn't do to get a laugh.
Interesting. He was kind of like Owen Hart and the Bull bulldogs and pulling ribs. Maybe not as mean as the bulldogs, but I didn't know that about Adrian. I do know that he teamed with Roddy. Or I was going to ask you, I've always heard he teamed with Roddy in L.A., but I've never seen any proof of that. Was that
There is they didn't team very long.
Oh.
Adrian wasn't here that long, but they did team. There is actually a match on YouTube. If you go ahead and you look for Tank Patton, Roddy Piper, you should be able to pull it up.
Okay.
There's a brief handicap match involving Tank Patton where they're looking to get over against Adrian and against Roddy.
Oh, I'll have to look at that. I know I've seen the name Tank Patton and him wanting to fight Roddy, and it was either Walton or LaBelle, Gene LaBelle, interviewing him, and he had a hat that said Tank, like a military-style hat. So I'll have to go look for that. Can you name the website the fans could get the Ron Star book again, real quick? And
it's Ron Star, blogspot.com.
Great. And also, we haven't talked about your blogs that you wrote. What's the site for those? Because they're just as interesting as your books. I mean, I go back and read your...
Bodypress.blogspot.com. Those actually, now that I'm in between projects, I'm actually going to be working on these other projects. I'm already starting to get ready for a Southern California history book, and there's a autobiography I'm still in talks with the subject about, one of the wrestling legends about doing, and then there may also be a biography. So those are the three projects that I'll be working on over the course of the next 2 years or so. But, I kind of mentioned the writing. Right now it's kind of like the research stage.
Right, exactly.
Stage, and I love that because by the time, I'm done with the writing, I'm done with that. I want to take a break. Then with all this stuff with the self-publishing, which is something I didn't anticipate doing, but I ended up doing it, and I basically did all myself. I learned a lot. Ricky Berry was a very big help as far as suggestions that he gave, with his background in printing. But, I did the cover design, everything, did the layout, all this stuff that was new to me that I really did not want to do at the beginning. But I'm glad I did because now I have the vision. My vision came to fruition the way I wanted it to. I had no compromises whatsoever.
Right.
But still, it's a lot of stuff, involving shipping, setting up a website, doing the marketing, setting up interviews, and so forth.
Well,
but, I'm glad. In the end, I'm glad that it's on.
Well, let me ask you.
May go into actually expanding beyond my own books and just maybe giving other would-be writers an opportunity to publish their books. So that's something that I'm seriously considering. But in the meantime, I really would like to go and occasionally start doing those blogs again too, because there's your brief pieces, and then of course, I don't have to wait 2 years to write on them.
Right.
I have to wait 2 years, before they're produced.
Well, they're amazing. I mean, I go back. I think I've probably read all your blogs about 4 or 5 times, at least 4 times a piece, and such a thrill to see them pop up on my screen back then when you were doing them. So I look forward to seeing more of them. But let me ask you a question. You mentioned you're going to do a Southern Cal book about professional wrestling. How many years back on that will you go? Will you go 100 years like you did Northern California, or?
Absolutely. 100 years just like Northern California. Might be slightly shorter, but it's in a lot of the same format as far as, kind of documentary meets a wrestling program, where you get it takes you back to that era, that time, and you kind of see what the storylines were like. But also, too, it could be a little bit different. I think probably a little bit more on the modern era. But it's a different territory. It was a different territory, even though there's such close proximity.
Right.
Michael Bell was a different individual than Roy Shire.
Oh, of course.
You had, with the exception of the Roy Shire, Joe Malkovich's promotional war, which wasn't really much of a war, to be honest, back in 1961. You hadn't really had any promotional wars in San Francisco since the 30s, although they were preheated wars that they had. as late as the 50s. And, of course, television was a bigger factor in Los Angeles, in Southern California, than ever was in Northern California, particularly during the 50s. Later on, Roy Scheier made, masterful use of television for several years. But so it's a different territory. The personalities of the territory is different as well, too. So it's going to be a different book, similar format. But I'm excited. It's that was what I originally planned to do. But I put that off. Like the Northern California book, and it's a decision that I'm glad I made because there's other projects still waiting here for me. So.
Well, that's
Jeff Walton had a great book.
Yes.
But it's as much about Jeff Walton's story as it is about the LA territory.
Richmond 95171.
Right. Exactly. And it's a great book. It's as a treasure place on my bookshelf. But this will be a bit more comprehensive book than Jeff's, and it will be, and it's going to cover all the big names, Bassi, Polis, girls, of course, but it's also to shine light on some of the individuals, just because we never saw them on television, definitely deserve another recognition. So there's going to be a lot of profiles on individuals that maybe people don't know about, but still have a fascinating story to tell, or that story about them that can be told. And made a huge impact on the Southern California wrestling territory and in the wrestling scene at large.
Well, I sure hope you have a chapter or a half a chapter of Jimmy Lennon, because when he came in to announce in the ring as a little kid, for boxing with my father, I'd watch boxing matches with him, or I think it might have been called Boxing from the Olympic Auditorium. I'm not sure, Rock, but when I started watching the wrestling, I was stunned. From L.A. to see Jimmy Lennon as the announcer, although I did see him in the wrestling magazines occasionally. But to see him live, it just brought back so many memories of my father and I watching boxing together. Because my parents were divorced by then. My dad had moved out of the state, so I didn't get to see him that much. But Jimmy Lennon is just such a great guy, from what I've always heard.
I climb every sense of the word. That word gets thrown around a lot these days, but he's definitely the definition of an icon. And that's one of the things that was different about the LA territory, too. San Francisco, a little bit more serious of a territory. I don't know if LA, just because it's, because of the media or because of Hollywood, it's a little more flashier, I guess, the territory is the way to describe it.
Definitely.
Different personality, and you had the... and let's take nothing away from, say, for instance, like Ken Emery or Alan Bolte as far as announcers, but the support staff, so to speak, were also personalities in themselves. Jimmy Lennon as an announcer, just charismatic. He's a celebrity in his own right.
Right. Yes.
Red Shoes Dugan.
Yes.
Very recognizable, and again, a celebrity in his own right. Very different from a lot of the referees that you had going in California. Again, not taking anything away from them, but it was a different territory, a different style.
Well,
and you could have those big life personalities and not have it distract from the product.
No, exactly. There isn't any comparison from our referees here up in northern, from Roy to Red Shoes Dugan. He was part of the match, jumping over the wrestlers to make a pin. I'm looking forward to the Southern California book because that's what you grew up with, and you'll bring insight that, Northern California fan necessarily wouldn't understand. Mil Mascaras, we only had him here I maybe 3 times that I remember, but you had him down there all the time. It'll be interesting to read your writing about him, and L.A., from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was like a jumping point. Wrestlers would stop there on the way to Japan, so LaBelle had a lot more big-name talent to use than Roy did.
Well, I would say in terms of numbers, I would say yes. The names were, incredible stars in Northern California. But again, it was different. You did have people coming through, so you had a revolving door of stars, so to speak, more so in Southern California. Mm-hmm. You have the strong ties to Japan, not just people stopping in from the tours, but also because they have strong ties with the promotions. And, of course, like the Dow in many years, has strong ties with Vince in New York, Vince and Senior. So
towards the
very,
end.
very lucky. And, of course, television was very big for us, too. It got broadcast all over the country. From what I understand, I'm just going to verify this in Puerto Rico as well, too.
Really?
That's what I heard recently. I want to try to verify if that's the case. But, yeah, so you had guys, you get people in New York who grew up with the New York product who pop for the LA guys because they're familiar from watching them on television.
Right, the Spanish network. Well, somebody that you'll definitely, I'm hoping you talk to, Vandell Drummond, had mentioned to me that he knew it was shown in Puerto Rico. So you're the second one to mention that to me, that he had done research. That is going to be an incredible book. Definitely, just like your other two. Well, we've been on an hour. I'm going to tie this all up, and thank you for doing the show. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
And sorry I'm a little slow. I had an accident at work and had to get some stitches, and so I'm not 100% here, but I'm doing my best here, Rock, and thank you so much.
I could not tell it was a problem whatsoever. I'm dealing with the cold, a very bad cold after about a week and a half. I catch the shake, so I feel you. I feel your pain.
Gotcha. Well, listen, what are the two websites again? We could get the fans could get both of your books one last time.
For when it was big time, a 100-year history of Northern California professional wrestling. That is when it was big time.blogspot.com. It is $26 plus shipping for the 350-page book. It's in an 8x10 Lux format with over 200 photos. There is also shipping available internationally as well, too. You just have to inquire. There is email address on which, this site where you can inquire if you have any questions about ordering.
Gotcha.
Ron Starr's book as well, too, is available at Rotten Ron Starr, Bad in the Bone, blogspot.com. And that's $22 for that book. Not as long, lengthy as the NorCal book is. And there's also actually autographed photos, of Ron available. We decided to make those available and some DVDs. So people just want to get photos, or they decided they didn't want to try the book, or they wanted to get both. The Lux packages available. I thought it was a good idea to inquire about getting autographs of photos of Ron. So we made that available to them. And again, international shipping and domestic shipping is available.
Gotcha. So if people want to get a hold of you personally, what's your email address or Facebook address? Because I know you have an incredible list of DVDs available.
Yeah, I don't really do much into the DVDs as far as providing those anymore. I just don't have the time.
Sorry about that.
And, I get a lot of inquiries, but, especially I think that's kind of funny when it comes to that kind of stuff, is that a lot of inquiries and very few people follow through.
Gotcha.
If you're
okay.
a serious collector and you want to add to your collection, by all means, feel free to contact me. You can email me at rockrims@aol.com. That's pretty much what I'm doing right now. Is if someone is looking for something, I know if someone has something that I wanted that was hard to find, I would want them to make it available to me.
Gotcha.
So by the same token, like I said, I don't really push any of that footage. But if anybody's looking that's rare, there's got to be 1,000 DVDs in my collection, and I just actually got another 5 or 6 dozen DVDs in just the last few weeks. So a lot of good stuff there. So
Great.
Then feel free to contact me.
Great. Well, Rock, I'll let you go here, and thank you again. And good luck with the 2 books, and with the third one, Southern California. And it's been just professional wrestling. It's just been a pleasure. And again, I apologize for being kind of aloof. This will be up on SoundCloud.com within the next 48 hours, and I'll send you all the link and all of that. So,
fantastic.
If that's okay. God, thanks a lot, Rock, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. You take care, friend.
All right, we'll talk. Thanks, man.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. That was Rock Rims on episode 53 of DERFCAST. You can listen to past episodes of DERFCAST on SoundCloud.com. Type all capitals, DERFCAST, into SoundCloud.com, and my shows will come up. Also do the same for iTunes, all capitals, and we're now a member of Comfortably Zoned Radio, owned by Ralph Tycho on iTunes. So thank you so much, everybody out there. And remember, stand up to bullies. It's that easy. And a shout-out to my buddy out there, Bob, from Bob's Radio Cafeteria. You can look at his videos on YouTube under the Clarences. DERFCAST 55 will have Supermouth Dave Drayson Part 2. And coming up after him will be Irish Mickey Doyle, Vandell Drummond. Big Billy Anderson's coming back. Thank you, and God bless everybody out there.